So thank you very much, Tatiana, and I'm very glad to be here at an early hour, which is one of my weaknesses. and so what I would like to do today is, I suppose you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see everything. You and your screen.
Brilliant, brilliant. So the topic that I chose today is translation automation. And this is something which is a bit like a vision. This is something that people are wondering whether it's reality. And one of the reasons why I chose this topic is that I have heard some different opinions on this. And I wanted to understand whether this can be made a reality or is it just a dream. And for example, one person that was telling to me that translation automation would not be a reality was Don Shin from One Stop Translations. Not sure if everybody knows him. He's quite a visionary person. And what he was saying is that when the mobile phones are assembled in China, they are still assembled manually. And the reason is that it's not worth automating it. Because there are like relatively smaller amounts of production happening there, and it is just much better to throw people at the job. And this made me think a lot, and I just wanted to understand how people are responding to this, whether they think that automating the work of project management is a possibility or not. And I don't know if I can ask you, Tatiana, to check with the audience, like right there. Does the audience believe that translation can be automated, project management can be automated or not?
No, they're all nodding that yes, they believe that everything could be automated.
Wrong topic.
No. We can have some comments. If you'd like.
No, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious.
Some tasks may be automated, but some are to be left for humans only.
But what are those?
Everyday routine work, it should be automated. Routine writing the same emails all over again, or reusing the TM or something else, it could be automated. But not new content.
But that's more from the translation side. I was thinking more about the project management.
Project management side. And we'll ask the owner of the company whether he thinks that translation process could be automated. I think it's really very interesting.
Yes, I think it is possible in 5-10 years.
Okay.
5-10 years it will be done. Yes. So we are looking for other possibilities in business now.
There's no need. I think that human relations, vendor management won't be automated. So those are the parts that are probably more exciting. Okay. So let's then maybe move on. And it was actually just yesterday that I was talking to my friend Lone Beheshti, who works at an LSP called Comunica Deca. And she was telling me, she works as a project manager, and she was telling me like how much she enjoyed dealing with one of the most quirky translators in the company, who was like sometimes coming through as a bit rude, all the time like very prepared, very opinionated, and that was the thing that made her job satisfaction. And I found that this was also like a key thing to understand, because most likely people like to deal with translators. So the question is whether question is not only whether translation automation is myth or reality, but it's also whether people are interested in automating the project management work, or that is like human work. So I will be very much looking forward to your feedback. If you've got comments to this, then don't hesitate to let me know. So the first thing that I'd like today is to take you to the journey that I've been through with my company Be Lazy, and also the learning that went into this, which is by now almost like a year and a half of learning, and to understand like what were the key findings on this journey. I would also like to demystify APIs, because what I found, and maybe this is completely fine with you and it's easy for you, what I found is that in a lot of cases, company owners, project managers look at APIs as if they were like very, very complicated things. So I have taken 3 videos that are showing work with APIs that are not long than 3 or 4 minutes. And it's like how to set up working with APIs. Then we're going to look at a business case for translation automation. And there is one more thing that I promised, which could be also a discussion, the profile of an automation-focused project manager, which is probably different than a profile of a project manager who wants to get things done. So in this presentation, I'm going to use a couple of words. That LSP, language service provider, I don't think that it needs a lot of explanation. This is the translation company, basically. And MLV is a multilingual vendor. And in the way I'm going to use that, multilingual vendor is the one that works for the end customer in multiple languages. So it doesn't really matter if the translation goes into 3 languages or 33 languages. What matters is that this is the one that is working with the customer, the customer's people, the customer's systems. The SLV, single language vendor, again, can be a regional language vendor. So it's perfectly fine to provide a couple of languages rather than one. But what is specific here is that the SLV is providing a subset of all the languages that is needed and works for the MLV rather than the end customer. And finally, the automator that I'm going to talk about is always the company that wants to automate. So it can be the MLV, it can be the SLV, or it can even be the freelance translator or reviewer. So we're talking here about translation, so I'm not gonna talk about interpreting at this point. And what else do we have to know? APIs. So APIs, when we talk about it, these are application programming interfaces. That's the short. That's the that's where API is coming from. And these are like programmatic ways to communicate with other programs. APIs are not new. APIs have been around since since object-oriented programming, more or less, allowing even the operating system to work. But not all the APIs that exist are exposed to the public. So there are 2 types of APIs. One is when you go to somebody's website and you check for the documentation and they say that these are the APIs we have. But in reality, there's more to that. There are also internal APIs. For example, when you go to a website and the website is like an application, most likely that website's front end communicates with the back end of the software through internal APIs. These are not publicly documented. These are not following any kind of documentation that is available for you. But if you use a web browser like Google Chrome in developer mode, you can actually see what the website does. And very often you are able to catch this or change this and do the same work as you would do in a web page. And the last bit is web scraping. And you see that I'm pretty focused on the web. Because the thing is that the web made it possible to automate some of the work that was previously not automatable. There are some web-based testing tools, and maybe some of you have heard about Selenium that has been around for a long, long time. And these are like automating the test by simply reproducing what a human would be doing. And sometimes web scraping is that if you're not able to communicate, if you're not having like a pretty up-to-date website, and you're not able to communicate with the website through internal APIs, the only thing that remains is that you check what's in the HTML page that you finally received and conclude from there. So these are the things, and I'm talking about vendor portals, I'm talking about translation management systems. These are the things that can be used. And here maybe the first takeaway is that we don't have very good APIs at this industry. And why is that? Because when you want to automate in a MLV, SLV, freelancer setup, most of the APIs in the industry, with the exception of very few, are actually built with the owner in mind. So while the enterprises have had all the possibility to automate everything, the others did not. Why is this? It's as simple as authentication. Who can use the API? So if I am an enterprise and I am buying a certain translation management system, I can check what rights do the APIs give. And yes, if I want to integrate my content management system, my website system, and so on and so forth within the company, of course I want to give the programmers administrative rights. And many of the APIs in the industry only allow administrative rights. And that's a problem, because obviously then the other people, vendors, who are like many, they are not able to connect. And what does this pyramid show you? Well, why does an enterprise buy any kind of a translation management system? Because they try to solve a business problem. They usually have a lot of translation coming from different parts. They want to get people to submit these translation jobs in as easy way as possible, to monitor these jobs and to take these jobs to completion. The agencies and many enterprises these days, as I see, the larger, the more sophisticated ones who have like a bigger budget, they work with these companies that are large MLVs that are also called super agencies by Slater. These people, and I'm talking here about Lionbridge, Moravia, SDL, TransPerfect, and similar companies, they consult the enterprises on workflows and implement a solution. The solution may be theirs or maybe somebody else's. And what do? Well, some of them work with freelancers, but many of them work with SLVs, the single language vendors, and I'm sure that we've got quite a few in the audience here. They outsource certain languages to certain companies, or certain product lines of certain languages to certain companies. And the SLVs are the collaterals for scalability. So what I've seen is that it's possible to work with freelancers. It's possible to work with in-house linguists. But when you can't really predict very well on the enterprise level how much content is going to come, then the way to go is go with the local companies, because they have access to good linguistic talent and they are also able to hire more if need be. So, and train them as well. So this is the reason why I see that SLVs are actually not really endangered species, because even though the disintermediation is possible, scaling up for an enterprise is really hard because it's not their core competency. And then finally, we get to a very simple thing, doing the work. As simple as it may sound, it's not always very simple, because what I have seen recently is that the job size has decreased, whereas the job training material has increased. So there's way more references, way more things to read and learn for a linguist, for a translator. at the same time, the amount of work is decreasing for a single customer. And therefore, actually, freelancers can work probably with less customers today. When I'm talking about the big ones, I'm talking about the Apples, the Googles, the whoever orders, European Union. They can do with less end customers than before. But there comes the complication pyramid. Like, what do everybody want? I mean, the freelancer just wants to be productive, just wants to deliver good quality job in a quicker way, because obviously if you are paid by the hour, paid by the word, not by the hour, then your concern is how many words can I do in an hour? And while this may not always be a very conscious thing, it can just, it is always like a decision factor. Am I able to pay my bills, make a living, or am I not? The single language vendors get a lot of jobs, and they are very much wanting to track deadlines and quality. I didn't write quality here because it's ultimately the freelancer that they hire that is providing the quality. But it's not always just a lack of knowledge or lack of commitment. It's sometimes what we see is that somewhere in the process, sometimes some instructions get lost, and that is not the translator's fault. And then come these MLVs or super agencies that are in there for compliance with SLA. So for example, sometimes you've got some customers who want to deliver everything in 12 hours through this line. And if, for example, if they miss one language out of 33, this agency would not be paid. So this large company would not be paid. The other thing is reporting, making it very shiny, very nice for the customer to know that we are doing a great job. And what the enterprise is into is simplification of the processes, which often fails because of their internal people, not because of the what I call supply chain, and integrations, which is basically one way of simplifying. But translation automation with integrations is like almost synonymous. So what happens next? Well, who has the lowest budget here? Of course, the freelancer. I mean, let's say something like Amazon, they outsource $170 million worth of translations. And what do they have to care about? Their translation management system. And then they outsource it to the agencies who, on the one hand, do have a translation management system, which can be the same as what the enterprise is using. In today's world, there is way more of the online translation management systems than there used to be before, like web-based translation and so on and so forth. But some of it is giving you the job, others are not. So if you have to ever work, let's say in SmartLink, you don't have your own SmartLink, or you don't have your own global link. If you work in, let's say, XTM or MemSource, those are able to push the job to your servers or across even. When it comes to, for example, MemoQ, if the enterprise is using MemoQ, no, it's like you need, by now you can, but there was a time when you could not. So it's like there are some tools that are allowing you to shift things to your own infrastructure. Others don't allow you this. And what always allows you to shift things to your own infrastructure is the offline work. So if you get the Trados package, you obviously have to work at your on your computer or with actual files, which makes things actually easier, honestly. So other than this, these agencies definitely want to make sure, these MLVs definitely want to make sure that they are able to capture every single job. So this is where the business management system comes in. And when I'm talking about translation management system, I'm talking about what holds the content. And of course, the enterprise TMSs also hold some kind of project management. But because of the different enterprises working in different ways, there is not a single TMS that is holding all the jobs. So an agency like this uses either a commercial solution such as XTRF or Protemos or Project X or Plunet, or they are using their own system that they have developed themselves. Plus, if we are talking about packages, they might use an online tool to process those packages. So for example, Star Transit creates packages, but I've seen companies that push that into another tool that was used online. So when I talk about CAT here, computer-assisted translation tools, they are very similar to TMS. The only differentiator here is that these are deployed not by the enterprise, but by somebody else. Now comes the next thing, SLVs. Because of the BMS, because having to work in, I don't know, XTRF, these people get the jobs in a vendor portal. And they also have their own BMS. Lovely. So they have to take the jobs in the vendor portal, accept them, create them in their own BMS, monitor it, and in the end deliver in the vendor portal, which is just another interface of the customers, so the super agency's business management system. Then they work with the TMS, if it's an online TMS. So if they did not get World Server packages in the beginning, but rather work in SmartLink, they have to work online. Plus, if they are able to have packages, then they might also use a CAT. So maybe instead of sending the Trados package to the translator, they want them to work in, I don't know, in MemoQ or MemSource online. And then the poor translator, in the end, comes in, has to use the SLV's vendor portal, has to use the TMS, has to use the CAT, and might or might not actually have a place where they are storing information about the project. So I've seen translators taking care of registering every single job, and I've seen translators not doing that when they were working for 5, 6, 7 LSPs. Then some of the translators simply don't do that. So there are a couple of critical moments, though, in a translation management system project that are worth looking at or automating. The first thing is a job creation. A job creation is always important because this is when a job becomes available. The second thing is the quoting. And when I talk about quoting, and this was a big finding for me, is that in an LSP setup, quoting is not about money. Because if you have an agreement that you get whatever number of cents for a word and for a fuzzy match, for a 100% match, whatever discounts you give, there is no talk about money. But even with MLVs, there is oftentimes talk about time. Can you do it by this afternoon? You may or may not. But I have heard about cases like, can you do 10,000 words by tomorrow morning? Which is a bit hard, even though some companies may be able to do that. The next thing is the job acceptance, which is also like a critical moment here. That's in every single workflow, no matter if it's 10,000 words or if it's 10 words, you have to accept the job. I'm taking it. Then comes the package extraction or the file download upload, which is basically, I got a WordFast package. I don't use WordFast. How do I deliver this to the translators or to the SLVs? Vendor assignment, it is who's going to translate. And in an online tool, this is particularly important because it's not only that if you, let's say, use a tool like Protemos or XTRF, but the customer is using an online tool like, I don't know, SmartLink, you need to make sure that the job is not only assigned in your business management system, but it's also assigned in SmartLink, right? And then finally, the job delivery and closing, meeting the requirements there. So these are the moments that are actually in dire need for automation. But what can you automate? And this is something that when we started this conversation, is it possible to automate translation linguistically, project management, or the transaction with the client, the quoting? I mean, of course you can automate the quoting these days. That's why you use a business management system to have the price profiles for everyone, and just an analysis from any of the tools that you use. Of course, it's already reality. So these are the different levels, and I'm mostly talking about the project management automation. I mean, when it comes to linguistic automation, there is machine translation. Some of you might be familiar with how much is possible, and that also needs to be in the CAT tools, in the translation management systems, because otherwise, in a real life environment, it's hard to do. But most of the CAT tools, most of the systems do have a reasonably good modular approach to machine translation. But the project management and transaction automation is different. Instead of speaking an awful lot about what we have identified, I gave you a link here, which is the result of, I would say, a year's work. What are the typical scenarios, transaction scenarios for giving, taking, and managing jobs? And how are they technologically different? I mean, this company, Be Lazy, what we're trying to achieve is efficient, continuous localization. So when you got 10 or 100 words to translate, those should not always come with very different specifications. There should be no place for variations, whether it's the first project, the second, or the 150th. And if there is a process which is always adhered to, then things are going to work in automation. But the problem is that not everything is the same. So if you get a project package, let's say a Trados package from your customers, then the automation is relatively easy, right? So you just put it into your business management system. The business management system assigns the translator, gives the translator the files, and so on and so forth. But how many times have you had a problem that, yeah, you got it, but it was very well prepared? Or you got a project package for 5 languages that you needed to give to a translator for 1 language, another, and third, and fourth, and fifth. So there may be actually a preparation step, which is scenario number 2. And if you only get the original files, then it's actually not very good, because with the original files, you always need to somehow prepare it. And you need to make sure that you get consistent files if you want to achieve automation. So typical thing is multilingual Excel. If all the columns are the same every single time you get the job and you don't have to check it, perfect, automated. If the customer is changing, where is the Russian and where is the Ukrainian and where is the, I don't know, Latvian, that's a problem. Then it's much harder to automate it. It's not impossible, but it's much harder. The third one is the project creation in the online CAT tool, which is basically that after having packages, instead of sending the packages to the translator, what you want is to create a project in your MSource, MemoQ, XTM, SmartCat, you name it. Then scenario number 4 is the translation management system round trip with packages. Typical thing is Word server. Word server, somebody has to go in, somebody has to download the packages, or global site, or SDL TMS. This was more the old school, whereas scenario 5, with the online work, here you can think about SmartLink, Global Link, you can think about other like SDL Language Cloud, other tools that are now pretty new, but you can also think about MemSource or XTM or MemoQ, which are probably more well known for the translation community, which is where there is an element of vendor assignment within the translation management system, and this is what makes it different. And the last bit is the most messy. We talked about these super agencies and that they are creating solutions for the enterprises. Problem is that they are one more layer. So they sometimes create a solution that could be perfectly automatable, but for some reason a project manager comes in and creates it in a way that it's not so automatable. So when they have to send you some information via email, no. If it's not coming from a system, then there is a problem, and that problem is introduced by that super agency. So why are there so many tools out there? I mean, this is something that I was wondering, and I just learned that enterprises have different structures, different needs. And for example, one thing that really baffled me is how few tools are actually able to handle, how few TMSs are able to handle a good workflow with DTP, which is not a rarity. You get an InDesign, you need DTP. And like there is always an aspect. So the reason why there are so many translation management systems is that there are certain aspects that can be easily done in one system, but not the other. And the other thing is that the enterprise needs simplicity. So it's not enough to be able to do something, but it needs to be done easily, because in many of the multinational companies, you have 1,000, 2,000 people placing orders. And then you don't want to teach them. It doesn't matter how many project managers there are. It doesn't matter how many LSPs they are working with. It's not the most important thing. Is that if there are like thousands of people placing orders, you want a simple order form that. So what we are kind of doing with BeLazy is taking the different job sources and putting them into business management systems, because the part of the automation that is there for business management systems into CAD tools, that's kind of existing. So if you've got FluNet or XTRF or Protemos, they are integrated with MemoQ, some are integrated with MemSource, with XTM, with SmartCAD, whichever tool. So that part is working. I start my project in the business management system and I push it into the CAD tool. But in reality, many of the projects you receive are coming from vendor portals, are coming from translation management systems. They are coming from emails. And honestly, this is something that has been keeping me busy for a while. Like, is it possible to automate emails? I mean, we've got all this beautiful machine learning. And after all, what you need to know about a translation project is not too much. It's like you need languages, you need deadlines, you need some special instruction if there is any. You need to know the word count, but the word count doesn't always come from the customer, and so on and so forth. And then finally, there are other content sources. Let's say your customer tells to you, like, I want to have my Twitter account translated. Yeah, it's not as extreme, right? So all of this is going between these source systems into these target systems. There are certain events in the target system, those that were the moments we talked about, like the vendor reassignment, delivery, and so on, that need to be monitored and fed back into the source systems. So this is the basis of translation automation in my view. We are getting now to the second part, which is the APIs. And this is going to be much shorter. But before we get here, like, are there any comments, any questions in the audience regarding the framework of theory or the journey that I was talking about?
Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
Hi, this is Serena speaking.
Hi, Elena.
Actually, we don't have any questions from online from now, because I think that people should analyze everything they just heard, and it's early morning here as for Saturday, and
Tell me,
and,
tell me
and
about
for you
that.
too. So I personally I have some questions because I've been in a project manager's shoes for 7 years. I heard a lot of things that project management can be automated soon, and probably we can lose our jobs in some years. But from my experience, project management is not just about doing some interactions with clients or just sending emails or dealing with team building for the project, but it's dealing with all the issues and unexpected situations. And what do you think? Can it be automated too? No.
I don't really see it that way. So the first thing is that I don't think you would be out of your job. What I think is that the required project management skills are going to change. This is something that you will see soon on the last slide, because the problem is that if you create exceptions, you have to handle exceptions. If you allow the customer to create exceptions, you have to handle exceptions. So what I see is that from a I click here, I click there type of job, from what used to be what I called a file swapper job, it's turning into a process guardian job. And what I believe could be very interesting is to establish this. Like, I've heard a lot of talk about the exception-based project before. That's not new. It's been something that was mentioned 10 years ago. And what I think is that this is the thing that is worth looking at. It's kind of like, how can you identify what is at risk? And honestly, a lot of the tools out there don't do a very good job in this. And you have to check it all the time. And what's important is to pinpoint. Something may go wrong here. And then, of course, then it's a human decision, because there is not a full informed thing. And sometimes the best thing you can do is pick up the phone and solve the problem. And that's not automatable very much. I mean, maybe if every single translator, every single customer, everybody would be on the same technology infrastructure, but that's not coming in my lifetime.
Thank you, Istvan. As to continue these thoughts, I believe that it will help to make some better customer experience, as well as to have a little bit more discipline for income tasks from the customer to project manager. Actually, it maybe would be much better to have less force majeures or unexpected situations. Yeah. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
Tatiana, do you have some questions?
I don't have a question. I have just some comment from the real life, that recently when we read about some of your new announcements of connectors with Protomos and other, between Protomos and other systems, I suppose it's like within your company, yes, it's done. We had project managers, accountants, and most of the staff in the company absolutely dancing from joy, you know, because we understood that the life will be, with one client at least, will be so much easier that it will really change the workflow in the office in general. So it's just our huge thanks that you're doing what you're doing, because it's really, and nobody was scared that they'll have less job. We're glad that they have less job.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's interesting, actually, to hear, because there are people differently reacting here, I think.
I think that you never probably see those people who actually benefit from what you're doing. Project managers, and so I just describe you how it looks on that final point. Thank you. And I won't take
Thank
your
you.
time anymore.
Thank you. So let's jump into a bit of technology now. So what are these application programming interfaces? They allow programs to talk with each other. Lovely. People can't talk with each other, but now we want programs to talk. What I mentioned earlier is that not every API is public. So even if you don't think you are using APIs, you are using APIs. If you use a, let's say, Gmail and its interface full of APIs that you could actually automate. The reason why those APIs are not hacked is that Google has reasonably good APIs for Gmail, but not every tool provider. And the smaller the tool provider, the more unlikely API gets a big impact. Then REST APIs and SOAP APIs. These are two types, and SOAP was like more traditional, but even REST has been around from 2000. These are basically, I'm going to show you only REST APIs because they are easier to use. What they do is that they give you some very atomic tasks. So a lot of the tasks that you can automate or you can perform in a tool are exposed through this API, the REST APIs. But what's different is that you need to do everything separately. So for example, in the REST API, a file upload is not that easy. That's the most difficult thing. In a SOAP API, it's like, yeah, let's upload this file, let's create a project from that, and so on and so forth. That's still one call. In the REST API, it would be like, let's upload a file and get an identifier. Let's create a project. Let's associate the project with that file identifier. These would be 3 steps. The next thing is the authentication, which I talked about. That very often APIs are actually not really thought through. Who can use the APIs? Who should be using the APIs? What is important is that if there is a super user that has access to everything in an API, problem. If you are able to use an API just with your username and password that you would use in the website, that's excellent. And in here, I must say that in this industry, kudos definitely goes to MemSource because they have designed their APIs really well. I'm gonna show you Postman. It's a tool that is for API testing, worth getting to know. And then the last bit, and this is something I've seen a long time. One of the problems with the APIs is that a manager, an owner of a company, assumes that the developers know what to do. So when I'm talking about REST APIs, fairly simple to do. But at the same time, you cannot just say integrate these tools, because there needs to be way more than that. It's like how? What are the exact things that you do? So you cannot just say that an integration is an integration. There's so much to it. So what I'd like to do is run like 1, 2, or 3 little demos here. And I suppose that you are able to see my screen still. And look at this. This I just created for you. So I have registered in the IBM cloud. Nothing else, I just registered. I log into their interface, and what we are going to see is text classification. How does IBM Watson, one of the best AIs in the industry, classify texts? How can I classify my text? And you know that recently SDL has released Language Cloud, which was, to my pleasure, the first tool that I've seen to classify the content of the text. And this categorization is part of the actual offering. And yeah, it's a great thing. But at the same time, there are things that are very cheap, and even you could use it to integrate it with your own systems. So I'm looking at the resource list to create a resource. This resource is going to be the natural language processing interface. I just enter natural language understanding, that's actually the name, in order to find this. in the catalog because they have over 20,000 APIs, and I enable that. So far, it's quite easy, no? I need to select a region and the pricing plan, but I want the free pricing, of course. The region can be anywhere if I'm just doing a demo, doesn't matter. So I selected the light one and I create it. There's no need to change the names or anything. So now I've got natural language understanding after creating it. There is a very good description which says that make sure you have the curl command, and I'm checking actually if I do. I also installed Postman, just so that you know, and this is a tool that you can also install on your own computer. It can be used free of charge. So what happens is that there is an analyze a web page step which says run the following command. Instead of using it from the terminal every time, which I can do, and I'm going to show you how, I'm going to use it from Postman. And look, I just, instead of doing it into the terminal, I just copy it here in a text editor. This is a pretty normal text editor like Notepad. And you see that there is the URL over there that needs to be replaced. And on the top, there is the API key in curly brackets. So what I need to do is go actually into the manage mode in order to get my URL and my API key. Not a big deal to do. And just copy it over. So you see I copied the API key, I put it into my text editor over there. Fairly simple, no? And I copy my URL, and you see in the last line there is the URL. That's where I put my URL. So I've got something I can run. Look, it's going to look into this URL, which is newsroom.ibm.com. And it already did the categorization: health and fitness, therapy, cancer, brain tumor, things like that. So this is Postman. And now I'm going to implement this in my Postman. You can create some requests and you can reuse this request later, even if you're a project manager. So what I do is that I go to import and import raw text. And you need to enter a curl command here, and that turns it into a Postman request. So because this worked earlier, I just do this. And then I continue, and it actually creates a request that clicking on the save button later, I can actually save. And here you see under headers that everything can be quite easily modified. Like, look at it. You click on send, and it is sent, and it is the response is coming back. And you can see how many characters, how many features, what's the sentiment, what are the keywords from this. It's useful also for the extraction of terminology. And if I go to the body, I just change the URL. I mean, if I want to see something else instead of this IBM article, I just put in another URL. I could also use a file. So there are several ways to use this. And it extracts sentiment, categories, concepts, entities, and keywords. You see, the belazy.cat blog article that I put in here extracted the keywords, the names, for example, and it says business and industrial business software, and that's the category. You see, Plunet is, for example, extracted as a company there. And business management system is a relevant keyword. So you can get quite a lot of information about this. I didn't only do this one. I also did Google, if you're interested in that, and Integromat, which is a nice little tool, which allows you to put together different actions. So for example, this one I have created because I wanted to use an email address to save every email I receive into the Google Drive as text for text extraction reasons. So I created a mail hook, which allows you to, that's a email address, you see over there. If I send a message to that email address, every time the email comes in, it goes through a text parser that turns my HTML into a text and saves this into my Google Drive at a new text file location containing the HTML and containing the text as well. So there are very good tools for this. And you can't only work with Google Drive here, but you have a full list of tools available to you, your CRM, and like Apple push notifications if you like. So if I just want to create a new Salesforce account, I can do that easily based on the emails. So there's a lot of automation possibilities there that I think it's worth knowing. And now I just want to go back into, and if you just want to test out this thing with IBM text recognition, there is also this URL. I'm sure that you will get the slides later, so you can test it yourself. And then the business case is that you have to start at processes. And I'm going to speed up a bit because I think I'm going over time and I don't want to. So this is what I think is going to be the automation savvy project manager, who is rather going to be a programmer or an account manager, that they like to leave good processes behind and move on to the next challenge. They want to increase the number of projects running, and the time spent on research and improvements is not time wasted, but rather time very well spent. And they have ownership. I think it's important to give project managers an ownership and maybe even a small budget that I can spend this amount of money in order to make things better and make things faster. And process and exceptions. Nobody sees better the process and the exceptions in your organization than a project manager. And the process is never stopping within the boundaries of your company. It always includes the customers and the vendors. This is something that an automation savvy project manager needs to understand. What happens today is because somebody somewhere made certain decisions. So what you need to know is that anything can be changed. But the reasons why things happen the way they happen are the ones that are able to tell you what can change and what cannot, because this is something in certain boundaries. So improving the process together with the customers is very important. I'm not saying every customer listens. I'm saying that this is what I think in the future will happen. And then a good project manager has to be very thankful for collaboration, very much ready to address concerns. So if a translator or a customer comes with a complaint, turn it into understanding why they are complaining, turn it into understanding how they can make the process better. And what's interesting is that I talked about file shuffling, but in reality, it seems that a good translation automation project manager is a good project manager from whatever research project, if you like, or improvement project in a company. So the project management body of knowledge actually applies here in translation automation. And here are some links that you can take away and maybe read. One is from us, one is from SmartCat. And most important is that automation always starts with understanding the process in detail and understanding how the process can be improved and what are the reasons why the process is the way it is. Technology is just an afterthought. Technology is a slave to the process. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.